Welcome to another episode of the 30-minute portrait painting challenge. Today we're working on a 9 by 12 inch cotton canvas that has been prepared with oil paint ahead of time. We're mixing on a wet layer of oil paint as usual with this technique. So as you can see with the finished result on the left, we went for a very kind of like centered pose, a little bit closer to centered, but a little bit 3/4. So we're seeing some of the turn of the face. But anyway, let's explain what's going on here. So this is all real time. There are no edits involved with this video, just voiceover. I decided to do this exercise without talking while painting, which usually makes me more efficient when I don't have to explain while I'm painting. So today's painting is a little bit better than the last time, but what I'm doing here is trying to build the mask of the face. Now the palette is a very simplified palette. It's got pretty much 3 yellows, 3 reds, say 2 blues, and maybe 2 browns. But what we have here is a very simple skin tone. And we're using the same skin tone, but applying different pressure on the brush. So when you're working wet into wet, different pressure creates different values, even if you're just using one mixture on the brush. Now, if you can optimize that, then you have saved yourself hundreds of hours worth of mixing little tiny gradations on your palette. Now, this is by no means supposed to be the only way to paint a portrait. There's also a tiling method where you paint every single gradation, every single plane change. Every plane change is a color change and all that stuff. But this is more of an exercise in paint handling and basically just reacting to the paint and trying to see how we can optimize each step. So as we're painting the mask of the face here, you see that with the same brush, I added a little bit of a reddish tone, and that's for the left side of the face relative to us, and a little bit by the eye socket there. See how I'm kind of blending that out? A little bit by the eye socket and by the cheekbones. And we put it on the concavity of the eye socket on the right side relative to us. And we're using this to kind of blend out the mask of the face. Now what this does is it allows us to build the subtleties of the mask of the face without having to do too much filling in. What I'm doing is I'm preparing the surface of the big planes of the face such that I can go in with a dark brush, preferably starting with the eyebrows, working towards the eyes, the nose, and then ultimately you'll see a neat little trick that we'll use when we paint the mouth. One important thing to mention here is I did get a question about can these methods be done with water mixable oil paints, and yes, I do believe that they can be done with water mixable oil paints, but please note that the paint is traditional oil paint, and it's going to be much thicker and more saturated than water mixable oil paints. So that means that you're going to have to use more paint with the water mixable oil paints than with the traditional. But you can do this same exact method. You just have to use more paint. Now we're going to add a little bit of red underneath of the cheek here. And this technique cannot be used with anything fast drying like watercolor or acrylic or gouache. My apologies for that. This is just a different technique. It requires the paint to be wet the entire time. Now that reddish shape underneath of the nose and the cheekbones, when I was painting this, I was not really thinking about anything other than what the shape of the cheekbone looks like structurally relative to the jaw. So rather than kind of just look at lines and measurements for the face, I was looking at, well, the jawbone looks a little bit, I want to say, weaker relative to the cheekbone. And by weaker, I don't mean weak in the sense of a lack of power. I mean just smaller, less mass, I guess less density to it. So you see that the cheekbone is going to be thicker, more angular, and the jawbone is going to be a little bit softer. Kind of like a bouguereau is what we're going for. Now, this is by no means supposed to be a method of which how we can create a commission portrait or a perfect likeness of a model. This is reacting to shapes. Now you see underneath of that dark reddish shape, we have added a little bit of light for the cheekbone. And that area is actually going to be a little bit cooler. And the way we achieve that color is by just letting the tone of the canvas, the oil paint tone, just mix with the paint that we already had. Now you see that dark shape for the cheekbone, I keep talking about it. That dark shape for the cheekbone is going to be something we are eventually going to chop into, just like a sculpture. But we're leaving that very strong plane change so that we can cut into it. Now we're adding a little bit more light with some red. And basically what I did was just add a little bit of cadmium red to the brush. Like I said, the traditional oil paints are going to be a little stronger than the water mixable, so you're going to have to use more of it. Not that you can see the palette anyway, but just know that it is possible with the water mixable. It's just going to be a little different. Now we're adding in a little bit of a light with some red to it for the reflected light on the left side of the eye relative to us. A little bit of a goal with this exercise is to not have to change anything. That is, not have to repaint any areas, but just let each layer build upon the subsequent layers. Now, it's a very tough thing to do. It's mentally taxing to paint this way. So 30-minute windows are pretty good. Going over 30 minutes, you may want to take a break because you're going to end up second guessing things. So now you see we built a little bit of light for the forehead. And these are bristle brushes. I'm using mainly Silverbrush Grand Prix. Just because of space concerns, I'm not able to clean my brushes like I used to, so I just keep them in a container of linseed oil. The canvas itself is toned with oil paint and a mixture of safflower oil and spike lavender, though you can just thin it out with your mineral spirits and just cover it with oil paint. It would be just fine. Now you're seeing we're sculpting out the plane for the frontal ridge of the skull. And this is a very sculptural approach. Rather than spend 10 minutes trying to draw the proportions of the face, we've spent 10 minutes working out the mass of the face, the structure for the mask of the face using mass. And the skin colors are just as simple as just using burnt sienna white and ultramarine blue. And the tone on the canvases as simple as just using raw umber, black, and maybe a little bit of red to tone it. See how we're building right upon the previous layer? A little bit of the reddish color gives us the bottom area of the tear bag of the eye. Now we can fluff this out for the eye. And what I'm going to do for the eyes is going to be very unique. And I'm going to do something similar when we get to the mouth. The nose, not so much, because it is a structure that sticks out of the face just like the cheekbones. It's a very triangular shape, but the eyes and the mouth are kind of different. So what I'm going to do is prepare the lights for the eyes, and I will put a grayish tone for the sclera, the white of the eye, a bluish gray light tone with a little bit of gradation from light to dark. But we're not there yet, but when we get there you'll see. Now I'm building the lights for the top plane of the tear duct there. And a lot of stuff has happened in 11 minutes and 30 seconds of painting. So very little mixing is going on. There's almost no mixing going on. We just have a basic skin tone, the tone of the canvas that was already there, and then a little bit of pink by the addition of cadmium red. And we're just letting the paint react to the surface as we sculpt out these forms. Now we have added the light for the nose, which is going to give us kind of a straightish nose, looking at the structure of the nose. Using that same light, we're adding just another little gradation on the left side of the face relative to us. Now you can see how this pretty much completes the curvature of the mask of the face. What's different between this one and the previous ones is I really paid attention to building the planes for the mask of the face. I had a question about why am I not just putting in a flat tone for the silhouette of the face like I did before, and that's because I'm really just experimenting with these different techniques, trying to optimize every single step. Now we're going in with that grayish tone that I was just talking about a couple minutes earlier, and it is a gray blue. Pretty much just using the same brush, by the way, as the skin tone. Now you see a grayish blue for the eyes with a little bit more emphasis on light around the planes surrounding the eyebrows, but not really that noticeable. And we took that same brush because it had a cool tone, and we just applied what was left of it on the mandible, right underneath of the cheekbone. And that was a trick because we knew that the eyes were cooler, and the colors underneath of the cheekbone are also cooler. And when we do switch into the dark shapes and the pink for the mouth and other things, we will be switching brushes. So we will not clean any brushes at all in this entire painting. And now you see how we used that dark plane, just like a sculpture had a big chop, and now we kind of just soften that big chop and sculpted out a little bit more form for that cheekbone. And each layer that we add allows us to add more and more light. So we're basically working mid-tones up to the lights and down to the darks. But we start off with the mid-tones, and then we work our way up and down, respectively, based on whichever plane we're painting. The directionality of the plane relative to the light will determine the brightness of what we're painting. Now we're just about halfway through, a little bit more than halfway through the painting. Again, I want to emphasize the mask of the face is really important for this process, because when we add the darker brush, you will see a dramatic change in the appearance of this portrait. It's going to look almost like magic when we get there. Now, please take some notes on this, because, as I said, I did this without talking. This is a narration after the fact, but there were some revelations in the process that I'm just now noticing as I'm narrating this footage. That being that we worked from the middle tones and allowed ourselves to go up or down in value. And the ability to do this. So less pressure around the middle of the eyebrows made it less sharp. So we're painting the eyebrows directly on here, but with less pressure. There you go. A little bit of a soft touch like that creates a soft edge. So in a matter of seconds, we have soft edges, sharp edges, dark values, and lighter values for the eyebrows. And let's see if we can do that for the hairline. And we can. So it's just a matter of brush strokes. The pressure that you apply to the brush stroke to create this form. And now we're going for the corner of the eye, pressing down firm to have a darker shape. And now you're going to see with these dark shapes, the appearance of the portrait, in particular the eyes, is going to change dramatically. And these dark shapes, this is important now, please take note of this. I am using a raw umber, alizarin crimson, and black. You want to have a little bit of alizarin crimson in your mixture, because when the dark interacts with the skin tone and it blends with the skin tone, the alizarin is a red that's powerful enough to blend warm with your darks. And there it is. There's that point where the portrait changes dramatically. And note that we're still under 20 minutes of time. Now, with a little bit less pressure, we have created sharp edges, soft edges, dark values, and light values underneath of the lower eyelids. And we're going to do the same thing with the nose, prioritizing the dark accents for the corner of the nose. What's important here with the nose in terms of the face is the angular shape of the nose, the triangle of the nose, whether the nose sticks out more, kind of like a Roman nose, or if it is a little bit flatter, kind of like a smaller nose. That's going to be more important. And then where we place the dark accents of the nostrils, we can blend out from them, creating a warmer tone just using that same mixture. Again, it is black, raw umber, and alizarin. This creates a warmer, dark undertone when it interacts with the skin tones. Now in 20 minutes time, this is not a bad place to be. Now here's where a revelation comes into play with the mouth. I decided, well, why don't I go in with a light red, just like I did with the eyes. I went in with a light blue. And then maybe I'll put in something similar for the upper lip and let this curl upwards towards the philtrum of the mouth. Throughout all my years of drawing and painting faces, I've always noticed the relationship between the bottom middle of the nose and the top middle of the mouth. So maybe in a single brush stroke or a single shape, I can create that gradation and placement without having to do too much work. Now here is where it gets really cool. Now we put in that dark shape. Well, not yet, but we're adding the lights for the upper lip using just a skin tone. See, we have the lights and the middle tones here. And what's going to happen when we add in the dark? Here's where it's really cool. The dark for the middle accent. And for the bottom, because when we're drawing, typically it's better to figure out the top and the bottom. And a little bit of less pressure makes it just the right value. And now let's figure out how far to the left the mouth goes. Less pressure makes it less sharp around the inside of the mouth. More pressure on the outside makes it sharper. And here's the trick here. A little swirl of the brush creates that greenish or brownish gradation on the side of the mouth. Now this has to be the most efficient mouth that I have ever painted in my entire nearly 20 years experience. Now you can spend longer than this using the classical method just to figure out where to place the mouth. Or you can experiment with the shapes and do exactly this in 22 minutes, 30 seconds. And I was already happy with this at this point. A little bit more black around the eyes, less pressure makes it less dark. And we already have somewhat of the likeness of whoever we're painting. Again, don't worry about the likeness. If likeness is the concern, then spend your time with perfect light and shadow drawing. But painting is more than just likeness. Portrait is more than just commercial. There should be portrait as fine art, which transcends likeness. And believe me, it takes a lot of bravery to think that way. After painting portraits for so long, I recently just did a commission where someone called me lazy because I wasn't trying to recreate the photograph. And it's things like that that really puts it into perspective as artists, that we really have to think differently than our non-artist peers. Now we're going in with straight black and a little bit of alizarin. Now we have 7 minutes left. And with the 7 minutes, I'm going to use the same exact approach, but I'm going to paint in the hair and the background. By background, you'll see what I mean. Well, you already see it on the left anyway, but anyway, less pressure makes this less dark. So I'm going in for the middle values right away. I left a gap between the hair, the top of the hairline, and the skin tone to create that value gradation, killing basically three birds with one stone, though I don't advocate any violence. Now a little bit less pressure makes it less dark right here. And I won't talk so much here. You'll see how it works. And now you see we have lighter dark values closer to the eyes and the top middle of the partition of the hair. Already we have a series of gradations of values for the hair done immediately with this technique. And now with white and phthalo blue, less pressure is going to make this less blue. So we're using the alla prima technique to paint the hair the drapery on top of the hair. And a little bit more phthalo blue creates a deeper blue. Less pressure creates a different effect. There it is, more phthalo blue. And a little bit more phthalo blue. And at this point, we're just kind of moving the shapes around to decide how we want this to look. We could end it here, but I decided maybe a little bit more for the background. But we're at a very comfortable spot in the painting to be able to finish this in 30 minutes. Again, this is a 30-minute portrait painting challenge. Take as much time as you want, but I think adding that extra time pressure adds something more to the process. Kind of like a short time with gesture drawing adds to figure drawing. But being able to do this with oil paint is one of the most useful exercises when it comes to paint handling and working with planes. And less than 3 minutes left in this demonstration. I decided to go in with a little touch of color, a little more color on the side plane of the nose. Once again, I have to choose the simplification of the nose because I cannot go into all kinds of little details for that. So I just chose to add a little bit more warmth to this area here, and you'll see we'll do that for the eye to the left relative to us when we get there. And that'll be pretty much it. Now, emphasis is on the development of the mask of the face prior to doing all this. Now we're just adding a little bit more light. We're just messing around with the light now. This is a victory lap, basically. The gist of the painting is done. The major heavy lifting of the painting is done. Now we're just keying some lights here, just having some fun. Kind of like a motorcycle. Motorcycle is just winning their race and just deciding to do a wheelie just to show off. This is pretty much just having fun. But the core of this process, the most important fundamental concept is the mask of the face and utilizing that middle tone range such that you can add dark and light freely, keeping your brushes organized so that you don't have to clean any brushes in the process is a big deal with this process. And I decided not to sign the painting on camera just because I wanted to spend the entire time working on the painting itself, really trying to optimize what I can do in that 30-minute window. Once again, 30-minute portrait painting challenge is a lot of fun, and there's so much that we can learn about paint handling and planes and the the power of painting wet into wet, all the things that we can accomplish with this method. Once again, thank you so much for watching. I wish you the best, and I'll see you on the next one.